fans, it's your boy Luke here for another course breakdown, this time for the Waste Management Phoenix Open. We'll be breaking down everything you need to know for this week's course to get you prepared for any bets you were thinking about firing, or of course any of the fantasy players that you were considering rolling out in lineups. TPC Scottsdale is an absolute gem of a venue. It's one that seems built to be entertaining both to play and of course to watch on TV. We have by far the largest crowds that we see all year on the PGA Tour, about 150,000 per day, and the wildest 3-hole stretch to end any golf course, at least in my opinion. You got that stadium par 3 that's really tough, one of the largest greens on tour, and drivable par 4, and a last 18 par 4 that's extremely difficult, which makes this one of the more iconic venues year in and year out. Pebble Beach last year was beautiful. I am a lot more hyped for this week. It's a treat to see every single year, and honestly, it's a little bit more of a true test of golf. At Pebble Beach, we had the Pro-Am, a 3-course rotation, celebs playing alongside these pros, and overall, just a lot of variance and wild stuff happened. It was only fitting that in all the commotion, a first-time winner like Tom Hoge ended up breaking through, right? When we get these wild, volatile type conditions, that's the type of stuff that ends up happening. And unfortunately, I wasn't invested heavily into Hoge. His prices on the DFS boards were way too inflated. The outright market also way higher than where he's used to being, and honestly where he deserved to be. So we didn't end up taking advantage of that, but I did see quite a few people out there did take advantage of it. In terms of a course fit, in terms of the reason why he had an inflated price, was it made a lot of sense, right? He was a great course fit, was actually in good form, so good to everyone out there that was able to take advantage. I did have a Spieth ticket that I fired after round 2 at 85 to 1 when he was 11 strokes back. So to even have a sweat on that bet was pretty amazing. So that was pretty fun there on Sunday. If he ended up coming through, that would have been one of my all-time best bets. I actually put $100 on that. Would have won $8,500 if that came through. But we at the very least had a really nice sweat. What we're going to do here, we're moving on to the Waste Management Open though, a much better golf tournament in my opinion, much more predictable. We have a ton of course history to go off of here, a lot of data. We've seen this golf course numerous times, since 1987 in fact. And we're going to go over one course this week. Again, we're back to the single course rotation. We're going to go over the field for this week, and of course a complete breakdown of TPC Scottsdale. We're also going to talk about some of my key metrics for success at this course, as well as some of the comparison courses around the PGA Tour that I'm also using for some of my corollary analysis. At the end of the video, you should have pretty much all the information you need, whether you're playing DFS or firing bets this week, to start your process, and of course to start to identify some of your best plays. So with that being said, let's go ahead and hop right into it. So first off, a little introduction to this tournament in the field for this week. Last year's champion was Brooks Koepka at 19 under par. That was his first win for quite some time. The first time, frankly, we saw him compete for quite a while. He had been coming off that injury, hadn't looked very sharp, and at the Waste Management Open, it seemed like he just broke through that issue, right? He came out there, looked healthy, was chipping in left and right, the iron play was there, and he got it to 19 under par. In terms of winning score, that was actually one of the better winning scores we've seen for quite some time, because other past champions like a Webb Simpson and Ricky Fowler only got to 17 under par. Woodland the year before that took it to 18. Hideki, when he won back-to-back years, took it to 17 and 14 under par. And Brooks, when he won for the first time in 2015, that was only at 15 under par. So you can see the winning score ever since the redesign in 2014 has been right in that 14 to 19 under range. I do expect a winning score in that same type of range this time around. It's just a predictable golf course, which not only helps us from an analysis standpoint, also from a fan standpoint. We know it's going to be exciting. We know it's going to be a tough test of golf, but the guys that really are on their best stuff are going to go out there and get to, again, 15 to 19 under par, and that's going to take this thing down. The other part is a lot of the field's going to be over par. There's going to be a lot of implosions, and again, unless you're really on your game, this course is going to come up and bite you. In terms of the field this week, maybe the best field that we've ever seen. We have notables like Jon Rahm, Justin Thomas, Webb Simpson, Hideki, Spieth, Ancer, Xander Schauffele, Bubba Watson, who's coming off a second place finish over there at the Saudi International, Patrick Cantlay, who had a very solid performance last week at Pebble until his a little bit of a Sunday collapse. We have Max Homa, Daniel Berger, Sam Burns, Corey Connors, Harris English, Tony Finau, who should be a great course fit here, who we'll talk about later in the week, I'm sure, when it comes to DFS. Ricky Fowler, Victor Hovland, who also might be the best course fit here at the golf course, Louis Oosthuizen, and of course Scotty Scheffler still looking for that first win. In total, it's a 132-man field, which means with the normal top 65 in ties this week, it's not top 60. Last week at Pebble was a little bit of a different situation. It was top 60 due to the amateurs, right? They had to take a few more people out of the field to compensate for the 25 extra amateurs that were playing. In terms of this week, we're back to normal though, top 65 in ties, which means more than half the field likely is going to be making the cut. Typically, we see between 73 players making the cut week in and week out. Sometimes more than that, sometimes less than that. This week, obviously, it was just 60 players because of the top 60s in ties roll. But going forward, we're going to see about 55-60% people making the cut. So in terms of 6 percentages when it comes to DFS, we're looking at a pretty high number there. Also, with the just quality of this field, a lot of the top end talent, picking guys to make the cut shouldn't be that much of an issue this week. We're finally back to the one course event, which we said during the intro. Of course, we're just at TPC Scottsdale, notably the stadium course, and we can finally go back to using historical data, shots gained numbers, a little bit of recent form as well, because now we have 3 or 4 events under our belt, which makes our analysis a lot more where we're used to having it, right? Last week before that, especially at Kapalua and over there at the Sony Open, we didn't have recent form. We were dealing with guys we hadn't seen play for 2-3 months, which really made it more of a crapshoot. But now that we're back to our bread and butter, I expect to have, we've already had a pretty good start to the season. This is where I start to really get into my zone here, when we start to get into that flow zone, as we say. So I'm excited for it, excited to get into this course. So let's go ahead and do so. All right, so we got TPC Scottsdale, this stadium course. This has been the host of the Desert Classic, Waste Management Open, 3 or 4 different names since 1987, but a staple on the PGA Tour. This is a course that's iconic. It's been in pretty much every single golf video game out there. It's a par 71. We do get the extra par 4, par 5 turned into a par 4. All the par 5s are extremely gettable though. So overall, what makes this course so special is its risk-reward aspect. On almost every single hole, there are aggressive lines that you can take. You can play very conservatively, easily go out there, shoot 2-3 under par. But to win this golf tournament, you have to get to 6-7 under par for at least 1 or 2 days. Historically, the winners have all had that spike type of performance. A lot of times it's on a Saturday or a Sunday. The conditions are especially gettable on Thursday and Friday, so you can usually try to fire one off in the first 2 days as well. But you have to be aggressive. That's the key here. Almost every winner at this golf course has been known for their birdie or better percentage, their iron play in particular. And winners here, maybe not top 5 or top 10 finishers, have always been pretty long off the tee. Those are a lot of things that we've noticed, especially since the redesign in 2014. That was by Tom Weiskopf. You can see that's why I have him down for the designer, because he completely ripped this place apart. He made the greens a lot tougher. He added a ton of undulation to them. He raised almost every green surface as well, which adds a lot of difficulty with your chipping. It also adds a lot of difficulty with your putting. And when you're using irons and hitting into these greens, even though they're the largest greens that we almost see on tour all year, there's a few other courses that are slightly larger. It's in the top 5 though on tour at over 7,000 yards on average. 7,000 square foot on average. It doesn't matter, right? They're tiered greens. They have so much undulation to them that hitting a ball on the wrong tier is pretty much like missing a green. You have massive slopes from tier to tier, which makes getting the ball close to the pin nearly impossible. So not just getting the ball in greens this week is going to be important. Being an elite iron player and hitting the ball to 10 to 12 feet is going to be even more critical. So that's part of what makes this course special. A few other things we want to talk about is the ending stretch here. Probably the wildest stretch of golf. 16 is that iconic stadium par 3 where Tiger Woods hit that famous hole-in-one shot. Everyone's seen it. It's on TikTok everywhere now. It's that famous sound that you guys hear. 17 is a risk-reward drivable par 4. There's water on the left side, and it tends to just swallow up golf balls. The fairway is tilted from right to left, so unless you hit a perfect drive, you a lot of times end up in that water. So it usually determines the golf tournament on a Sunday. One of the more entertaining golf holes to watch. And then 18 is a demanding par 4. It's about 470 yards. There's water on the left, bunkering completely down the hole. Pretty much no matter your distance, you're going to be hitting it into at least bunker range. Only the elite distance players like a Dustin Johnson, who was able to do this in the past, could just launch it over everything. It's about a 350-yard carry. We are at elevation, so it's a little bit easier to do that. But that's part of the reason why distance is important here, which we're going to get into when we go by a hole-by-hole analysis. That's what we're going to do after we go through some of these general specifics, some of the trends that we see with this golf course. Is we're going to go hole-by-hole, and you'll see that the guys that can hit it 320, 330 yards at this elevation are at a massive, massive advantage. And it's from a strategy standpoint, not so much hitting less like smaller irons into greens. That's helpful, but you guys will see what I'm talking about later on. In terms of its scorecard yardage, it's 7,261 yards. It could play up to 7,387 depending on where they put the tee locations. In fact, the tips at this golf course, where people that are members, people that play here, that type of thing, they play it at the 7,387 yards. So historically, we have seen the tour play it a little bit shorter. If they played it at its full length, it would play a lot more difficult. And we are at elevation, so it really is playing 200 to 300 yards less in terms of its distance. But of course, that 200-yard distance would make a lot of difference there. And for a par 71, at least in terms of its scorecard yardage, that is average for the PGA Tour. But when we take into consideration the adjustment due to elevation, it is one of the shorter courses on tour. That's why we've seen a lot of shorter hitters have success here. That's why I said outside of winners, distance isn't really a prerequisite. We've seen guys like a Matt Kuchar have a ton of success here, guys like a Chris Kirk, Michael Thompson's played well here. There's just a bunch of guys that are shorter hitters on tour that are more of wedge specialists than anything. Brant Snedeker comes to mind. He's won this golf tournament. That come out here and play well year in and year out. So a lot of it is precision. But if you want to win this golf tournament, like I said, when we go with the hole-by-hole breakdown, you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. You have to be aggressive and willing to go for it here. That's kind of what this golf course demands, what makes it so special, so fun to watch on TV. There aren't many dog legs here. That's something to note. Is if there's any, they're moving from right to left. So draw would be the preferred shot shape here. A few of the par fives have a slight left to right influence, but not anything where you have to shape a shot. I mean, it's a 550-yard hole. You're looking at maybe 10 to 15 yards of curve at the very most on those holes. So you're really looking at a straight ahead golf course, which is actually not what players prefer. They would much rather have dog legs that force you to hit a type of shot shape. That's the type of thing that they prefer. And in terms of your approach ranges, it's extremely balanced. Rather than what we had at Pebble Beach, a few of the other golf courses like at the Amex, where the golf course was extremely short, this golf course demands shots from every range. You're going to have wedge shots in some of these gettable par fours. You're going to have the 125 to 150 range at a few times. The 150 to 175 range, which is typically the most common on the PGA Tour, again returns to prominence right about average in that category. And on some of these par fives, of course, you're going to have those 200 to 250 yard approach shots and at some of these par threes. So overall, you have to be a solid approach player with all of your categories, which actually simplifies our analysis. Using a plain old shots gained approach number is going to actually be accurate this week, right? Last week, we definitely had to emphasize those shorter ranges, but that is something to note here at Scottsdale. Another thing is the elevation profile. We're playing at elevation, like we've said. It's about a 5% boost in distance for all of your clubs. If there's not much elevation change at this course, though. So even though we are at elevation, we're in Scottsdale, which is more of a desert. We're dealing with desert golf. There's desert patches all around this place with cactuses, that kind of thing. But you're not dealing with any north to south elevation change. The entire course has a 15-meter differential, which is pretty much nothing, right? You're going to see maybe 4 to 5 yards difference. And a majority of that is just the raised green surfaces where they built it up a little bit, again, to add difficulty for some of those around the green shots. Grass types. Let's talk about the greens. We have Tiff Eagle Bermuda grass as the dominant grass type here. That is far from the end of the story. We also have a Poa trivalis influence, also overseeded this type of year with ryegrass to really give it a velvet, almost carpety type of texture. That's what we saw at the Amex, it's what we see at Innisbrook. We see it at TPC Sawgrass. A lot of these TPC type of golf courses want to have those carpet type of greens, which are really hard to upkeep. It's expensive to do that type of thing. But when you're at that premier type of venue, that's the type of grass that you'll be putting on. So we saw it at the PGA West over there at the stadium course, also at the Nicklaus course. And what happens on these greens is We have bent grass, like I said, we have that ryegrass, we have the Poa trivialis, and we have the Bermuda grass. It's really hard to pinpoint any type of specialist here, right? We can take a look at some of those golf courses, try and glean some of the trends, who's putted well at those venues, but the undulation, just the greens in general, are very different from course to course, right? Innisbrook doesn't have all that many contours to it. Some of the greens do have some, but in general, it's more of a country club type of golf course. Whereas here at the stadium course, or even at the Sawgrass Stadium course, ridiculously difficult greens. So it's kind of hard to glean too much from that. But overall, the best putters in the world are going to putt well here. It's all about reading the greens. I'd say that's the main influence here, the main thing that we should be hunkering down on, are guys that can read greens well. When we have this carpet-like surface, if you get the ball started on the right line, it's going to go in the hole. It's not like it's Poa Nua where it's going to be bumping left and right. You have that Poa trivialis in it, but because it's a mixture of 3 or even 4 different grasses at a time, it doesn't matter, right? That bumpiness, that influence we see throughout the day where the grass tends to grow doesn't tend to be an issue. If anything, it actually makes the golf ball go a little bit straighter. That's just how that mixture works. That's why they use this type of surface here. So I'm really just looking at the best putters on tour. The guys that are great at reading putts. Jordan Spieth has had a lot of success here. Hideki Matsuyama, who's also had a lot of success at Augusta National. Very similar type of greens there at Augusta National. Those type of guys are who we want to target. And sure, Hideki Matsuyama, not the best putter on tour, but when we get these really tough greens, he tends to do well. And what that tells me is that he's a great green reader, right? When it gets tough and people aren't making all those super easy putts, he tends to shine. So we're going to be targeting some of those specialists there for sure. We said before, we have massive greens here, about 7,000 square foot on average. That means they're about double the size of what we had at Pebble Beach. So you're going to be seeing a lot more greens in regulation, but don't let you fool you. That doesn't really matter. They are tiered greens. They have severe undulation. We are going to see a ton of 3 putts this week. We also have a ton of bunkering here, whether it's around the green, also around the bunkers. They tend to be deep bunkers. They're great sand, easy to get spin out of, all that sort of thing. But with all the undulation on these greens, the undulation in the fairways, it does make a lot of your shots tricky, particularly if you clip it a little bit, hit it a little bit too long. You end up missing in some of these around the green bunkers. They are not very forgiving. This was redesigned in 2014 by Tom Weiskopf. I know we said that before. Obviously known for some of the tougher golf courses on tour, and this is definitely one of those examples. It is desert golf at its finest. There's not that many penalties off the tee. Like I said before, a lot of desert areas. You do have some cactuses, some rocks in there, but you could also get lucky and have a completely free shot. Jordan Spieth last year, he hit the ball in the desert left and right, particularly on his 10th round, and it never really cost him. He had a good lie almost every single time. So I call it the Jordan Spieth effect, right? If you're somebody that tends to get extremely lucky, you're probably going to get away with it. But of course, you can have a ball jammed up against a rock, have to take an unplayable. All of that is well within play. So it's desert golf at its finest. You'd rather just keep the ball in play, of course, not have to rely on that luck. But even if you're a sprayer of the golf ball, it doesn't necessarily take you out of contention. We see it year in and year out. There's those 1 or 2 guys that get lucky. Sometimes they even get a bounce off a rock and get some extra distance out of it. You see some pretty wacky stuff here at Desert Golf. In terms of the fairways themselves, they're extremely wide. This is more of a resort-style TPC course than anything. Some of the largest fairways that you'll find for these type of tracks. The rough isn't very penal either because we're in a desert. You're not going to see 4 to 5 inch rough. It's just not possible when you're out here at Scottsdale. It's going to be about 1.5 to 3 inches at very most, which means that these players aren't going to have any issues out of it. There isn't even that much rough to begin with anyways because the fairways are so large. It's more like an outlining strip than anything. It's more cosmetic than anything here at Scottsdale. A few other things to note is there aren't many trees to block you out. So if you are missing left and right, but you are keeping it on the grass, you should have a shot into pretty much every single green. There are a few trees scattered, but as long as players are being cognizant of them, not being too hazardous, like at least playing to the other side with their misses, they're not going to have many issues here. In terms of general trends, key course characteristics, this is a ball striker's paradise. Like I said before, with the risk-reward aspect, when you're on your game, you can go out here and shoot some crazy scores. Jordan Spieth shot 10 under. He had a 62. Again, this is one of the more difficult golf courses on tour. Then we saw some of the studs last year go out and miss the cut at 5-6 over par. So if you don't have your game, this course will expose you, much like a TPC Sawgrass, where we see a winner near 20 under par almost every single year. But of course, a ton of the studs go out and miss the cut well over par. The cut at Sawgrass is usually over par, and some of the studs miss the cut year in and year out. It's just at these demanding tracks, some people hate them, some people love them. I love them. They are the best tests of golf out there. When you have a course that's extremely polarizing, where you can go out there and score if you have your stuff, and it's going to bite you when you don't, that's exactly what we're looking for in a golf course. I don't want a birdie fest out there where anybody's going to shoot 4 to 5 under par. If you have your game, you're hitting to 8 or 9. I also don't like a golf course where you're going out there and when you don't have your stuff, you're able to shoot even par. You should be penalized. You should be shooting over par. So that's why I love these golf courses. I see so many people out there in the industry giving it shit, but these are my favorite events by far. It's not even close. This next month and a half of the schedule, we get a ton of these golf courses as well. So I'm excited for it. That's for sure. A few other things to note here is we have chopped fairway grass areas around almost every single green. So rather than having rough patches, we do have raised golf surfaces. We have those bunkering, but it's fairway grass, which you would think is good, but it's not, because all of them being raised makes you around the green extremely difficult. When you miss a green, you don't miss by a yard. You're not ending up on the fringe. You're ending up 10, 20, 30 yards away at times. That's how raised these surfaces are. And there are just drop-off areas, runoff areas where you're pretty much going to be alongside everyone else that misses that green. And those tend to be some of the hardest chip shots in all of golf. So that's why, even though this is in an irons fest, we're looking for guys that can really score, get to, again, 15 to 19 under par. Getting up and down is important, because when you miss, you're going to have a tough shot. And the guys that don't have all of those shots in the bag are going to suffer wildly. That's why they say that you have to be a well-rounded guy here. I'd say the only thing that doesn't matter would be putting, right? You just got to be able to get it close to the hole, because the surfaces are so pristine. As long as you're getting the ball started online, it's going to go in the hole. So that's what we have to say about this golf course in general. The desert areas, like we said, could be playable. A lot of that comes down to luck. And the course in general gets more difficult as the week goes on. As it gets more sunlight tends to bake out. Of course, it gets more firmer fast, which means that you're hitting less fairways. And of course, it makes stopping the ball, putting spin on it, a little bit more difficult. And the weather here tends to be extremely consistent. You don't get a ton of storms, not a ton of wind. Anytime we have desert golf, that's usually the case over at Palm Springs, obviously over here in Scottsdale as well. It's like playing in a dome. So you're going to see some low scores. That's why the winning score is so consistent here. If we happen to get some weird spell of bad weather, you might see a winning score towards 10 under par, right? It's only going to go in the worst direction. If anything, we've seen perfect conditions over the years. So if we're going to see a winning score past 19 under par, it might get to 20, might get to 21 under par, but you're not going to see this place torn to shreds. All right, guys, on the screen, you can see the Pro Visualizer tool, same tool we've used on this channel before to go hole by hole. And what we're going to do here is get an idea of some of the strategy and play at Scottsdale, because like I said before, one of the key factors here is the risk reward aspect. And a lot of that comes down to driving distance. If you have that 310, 320 yard drive in the bag, there are a lot of options that are opened up to you. So first off, first hole is let's go back. First hole is a relatively short par 4. It's about 410 yards. If we take a look at the first tee shot, it's a little bit more straightforward. This is definitely a handshake of a golf hole. In terms of risk reward aspect, not really out there, right? You just hit a 3-wood out there, 250 yards, that type of thing. Then you hit a wedge into this green. It's a large green. If we take a look at the green itself, it does have undulation like all of the greens here at TPC Scottsdale. But it's a birdie hole. It's always set up to be one of the easier golf holes out here, and you really are looking to get a birdie out there. Hole number 2, also more of a handshake of a golf hole. It's only 450 yards, which is a little bit more lengthy than what we have at hole number 1. You do also have the introduction of these fairway bunkers, which are in the line of sight. You can see as of right now, the drive is set at 290 yards. If you're one of the longer hitters out here, you can take them out of play, right? If you get it out here 310 yards, that type of thing, 320 yards, there is no trouble to speak of. So that's why you see some of that driving already starting to come into play. Of course, I would leave you with just a degreed wedge at most, probably a 52-degree wedge for a lot of these tour players, which also makes number 2 one of the more scoreable holes on the golf course. Now you get to hole number 3. This could very well be the end of a snowman. Like I said, hole number 1, very much so birdieable. Number 2 as well. And of course, you get a par 5, which means if you can start off with 3 straight birdies, that would be the dream start here. If you get your drive out there about 310 yards, let's go ahead and see what that would look like here. You can see that it leaves you with about 215 yards to the green, which isn't all that much of an issue. The problem is you have to get it in the fairway and you have to take on this bunker. If you just want to lay back a little bit, like a lot of the shorter hitters on tour might be forced to, you can see that would be back here at about 294 yards. You can take the bunker out of play, right? But then you're left with a 260-yard shot over a lot of desert. It's penal in there. There's a ton of bushes in this specific area of the desert, also a ton of rocks, which means that a lot of people will lay up, right? A lot of people will hit their second shot towards the end of the fairway down here, just 230 yards, 4-iron, that type of thing, and leave a flip wedge into the pin location. This is what a lot of guys like Kuchar, a lot of those shorter hitters, Snedeker, that has had success at this golf course over the years, will do. But in terms of winners, the guys that actually go out and get to 19 under par, almost all of them are the guys that are taking it past this bunker. And this is really why I think we see distance playing so much of a role here, and why I felt it was so key to go a hole by hole through this. This is a huge advantage, right? This is almost a one-stroke difference on the field if you're able to get it out here. Of course, it brings a little bit more risk into play. You could, of course, shank it into the bunker over here or miss far right and end up out of bounds. This over here, past these trees over here, is out of bounds. There's a fence over there. So this is why it's such a great golf course, right? If you go up to the bunker up here, not the bunker, the green, you'll see that it's relatively flat. If you do lay up, you're going to have a perfect shot into the screen, a perfect angle, still very much so a birdie hole. But if you can somehow get an eagle here on par 3, going to make a huge difference. Let's go into the par 3 fourth. You can see it's 188 yards, relatively average hole here. You got your bunkering, a raised surface, plenty of undulation. You're really just looking to get par at these par 3s and get out of there. The next hole is a relatively long par 4. This isn't really anything special. It's just a difficult par 4. You hope to hit your drive out here 310 yards. Takes the bunkers completely out of play. The green is very average. Your bunkering over here on the left doesn't make that much of a difference unless they're putting the pin way over here on the left. Typically in the first few days, it'll be in the back. It'll be over here on the right. These are steep drop-offs, like almost every single green here at Sawgrass. But even though it's a long hole, it doesn't tend to be all that difficult. And you'll notice that the front nine here is much more gettable than the back, right? Those first 3 holes are all birdie holes. You see that there's a few difficult holes like that par 3, that long par 4, but they aren't anything close to what we have on the back. And that's where the water starts to come into play, where the madness starts to happen. So you're going to see a lot of your guys start off well, especially the ones that start off on the front 9. It might all fall apart. Just keep that in mind. Just look at this hole here. Par 4, it's 443 yards. A lot of the longer drivers of the golf ball are going to be taking risk into play. Of course, it brings these bunkers into play right here. But the best drivers of the golf ball are getting out here about 310, 320 yards. And they're going to leave themselves in a very good situation. So again, even though it's risky, having the ability to get it out here makes a huge difference. It sets up an angle if you can get it out there particularly far. It takes all of the bunkers on this hole out of play, having that angle into the screen, which, again, I'm trying to do this to highlight why distance is important. It's a short golf course, but having that extra 20 to 30 yards is a huge difference here. This is another long par 3. It's 223 yards. Don't want to go into huge detail there. It's one of the more difficult holes on the golf course. I've got to hit a really good long iron. Hole number 8 is a long par 4. This is really where you're starting to see the teeth of TPC Sawgrass. These bunkers here on the left are devilish. People hit into them all the time, trying and cut off some of the distance here. Of course, the further left that you are, the less distance you have into this green off the tee. So 320 yards is at the second bunker. The shorter hitters that are hitting about 290, well, that's where the first bunker is at. So there's a genius setup here by the officials, by the designers of this golf course. You very well may see some people actually lay back, try and take the bunkers out of play completely, and then have a long iron into the screen. So it's one of the more difficult holes on the golf course for sure. Number 9 isn't all that bad. It's about an average as a hole as you get here at Sawgrass. Sorry, not Sawgrass, at Scottsdale. It's 460. You're going to have about a 160-yard club in. Yeah, it's about as average as you get. You're looking to make a par there. Let's head over to number 10. This is the back nine. And this is where water starts to come into play. And again, like I said, big scores start to come into play. The bunkering here on the right is devilish. Even though this is a relatively short par 4, a ton of people will end up in this clover-shaped bunker, which not only has a lot of undulation to it, you tend to get a ton of really bad lies. It makes the shot into the green all that more difficult. If you hit a good drive out here, it is a birdie hole. But this is where you start to see the volatile nature of this golf course, right? You can see tons of bogeys, double bogeys out of this bunker, tons of birdies or even eagles and hole outs out of this fairway here. There's much more hole outs on this hole than you see at most holes on the PGA Tour. Number 11, 477 par 4. You have water on the left. This is really the first brood of a golf hole. First off, you look at the tee shot here. If you're getting it out there 300 yards, there's water the whole way down the left. So if you're somebody that has the yips to the left, a lot of times you're going to end up in the trees here on the right. And you can see it's one of the few golf holes that they left the trees on. So they knew that people would be trying to bail out because of the water on the left, and they wanted to make sure they wouldn't get away with it. So rather than having a desert area, you have those trees there, which makes this tee shot extremely difficult. The next shot into the green, you're looking at about 175, 180 yards. Of course, water on the left, bunkering. You're just hoping to get a par at this point. If you hit a bad shot, you're hoping to get a bogey. It's not a hole you're looking to really take advantage of. And then you get a 200-yard par 3. The water's not really in play. Go ahead and take a look at the green. It is over the green, but these guys, if anything, are looking to miss short, as at most golf courses because of the back to front undulation. So it's not really that bad of a hole. But 13 is also difficult. This drive, one of the more difficult on tour. It is a par 5, but it's a S-shaped par 5. So, didn't mean to hit that. It's an S-shaped par 5. So first with your tee shot, you got to make sure you don't miss to the right. Of course, a lot of the longer hitters on tour can kind of take the water out of play. You can see at 300 yards is where that water starts to end. But that also introduces both of these desert areas into play. So it's really pick your poison. Do you want to be potentially hitting into the water or potentially hitting into this desert area? And that leaves about 260 yard shot into this green, which if we take a zoom shot at this green here, you can see that there's little Pete Dye kind of bunkers there. Now, this isn't a Pete Dye design, but of course we see that at a lot of the TPC golf courses. Elevated green, huge drop-off areas past the green that'll roll out 20, 30 yards. You'll end up near these trees for shots back onto the green. It is a par 5, but it's not nearly as gettable as you'd hope. If you hit 2 perfect golf shots, of course there's eagles out there. But at the same time, there are bogeys and double bogeys out there in this hole as well. Let's go to number 14. This is probably the most difficult hole in the golf course. It's nearly 500 yards and a par 4. You see not really any bunkers out there, right? So off the tee penalty isn't really there. But you're going to have a 200-yard shot into a green with a ton of undulation, guarded by bunkers, raised green, just nightmare fuel, especially for the average amateur out there. Next up, we have a par 5. This is the last par 5 on the golf course, the last of 3. You have water the whole way down the left, so you can see the risk-reward aspect here once again, but even more so into the green. So if we go ahead and take a look at the green, completely surrounded by water. So if you want to hit a 250-yard 3-wood over water onto this green, I mean, if you're down 3 shots on Sunday, you don't really have a choice. You have to go for it. You see huge swings here. If people end up hitting perfect golf shots, you'll see swings up the leaderboard. But of course, you're going to see bogeys and double bogeys here as well, whether people are hitting the ball into the water off of the tee or, of course, on this second shot into this green. A lot of people going to layup, right? You're going to see, especially for the first 2 days, most people just hit a 170-yard shot to right around 75 yards and hit a little flip wedge into the green. But now we have that iconic ending stretch. I talked about it before. This is the stadium hole. You're going to see stadium seating the whole way around this hole. It's literally, that's why they call this the stadium golf course. This is a massive green, tons of undulation, and it tends to be a real difficult hole. A lot of it's the atmosphere. I mean, having 50, 60,000 people around is intimidating, but it's also relatively hard green. Number 17 is this drivable par 4. If you go ahead and take a look at the water off the tee, it's really what makes this hole special. Is over here near the green on the left is this lake, which doesn't look like it's all that much in play, right? It's like, oh, just lay up and have a flip wedge in. Yeah, that'd be a smart play, but most people try to go for it here. In this fairway, what you can't see here is completely undulated from right to left. Any drive that lands, let's say from like pin middle to the left, will end up in that water. It'll bounce directly towards that and end up in the water. Anything that lands about here to the right will bounce to the right and end up in the rough way over here on the right. The only way to get the ball on the green is to land the ball in this narrow stretch right here where it's flat, and then you got to hope that it bounces forward straight, or to somehow launch a driver way up in the air and somehow get it to stop on the green, which is a hell of a golf shot. If it's a front pin, good luck trying to do that. Every once in a while, they'll put the pin back there or in the back right as well. Makes it a little bit more feasible. But it's fun to watch, especially if a guy's down 2 strokes with 2 to go, that type of thing. They have to go and take it on just like over there at 15, which makes it really fun to watch on TV. Not so much fun to play. Now finally 18, an absolute brute. Shorter hitters absolutely hate this hole because there's no hiding. Shorter hitters have to take it on to the water here. You're looking at hitting it more out this way. There's water on the left. You have this bunkering on the right over here. And even some of the longer hitters on tour that are getting it out there, maybe to this choke point. First off, you still have water on the left. Any mishit to the left is going in the water. Any piped shot to the left is ending up in these pew bunkers. But of course, bailing out to the right, you have the bunkering there as well. The elite distance players, though, can take it out of play. You've seen players like Dustin Johnson. Oh, I don't know why it did that. Sorry. Players like Dustin Johnson have taken out here like 330, 340 yards and taken everything out of play from the left and the right bunkers and just bombed it down here. So that's why people say it's like almost an unfair advantage. That's why we've seen a lot of the longer hitters on tour have success here. So, all right, now that we went through the course, let's go through our key stats for analysis this week. First off, we're going to have shots gained approach, which we've outlined it multiple times during this video. This is a ball striker's paradise. Having every single bucket in your bag, whether it's the wedge shots or the long irons, is going to be important at TPC Scottsdale. Just a complete test of your approach play. We have large green surfaces, but like I said before, being precise enough to hit the right tier of these greens is even more important than hitting the greens themselves. If you're hitting the wrong tiers, you're looking at a ton of 3 putts, and it's pretty much just as useful as missing the green altogether. In terms of setting up birdie opportunities, because of the undulation we have here at this golf course, unless you're getting it to 10, 15 feet at the max, you're not going to have a realistic chance to make putts. So you're not going to see a ton of bullshit putting performances out there, as John Rahm would put them, where they go out there, make just every 20, 25 footer and end up winning a golf tournament, right? So this is why John Rahm likes this event. It's why he's had a lot of success here over the years. It's not a bullshit putting fest, as he would put it. Next up, we have shots gained off the tee. Like I said, like we just outlined during the hole-by-hole analysis, having that extra 20, 30 yards in the bag makes huge dividends on some of these risk-reward holes. You can cut off some of the sand traps, set yourself up for some of these drivable par 4s, and if you're somebody who's playing from behind, especially on the weekend, that could be exactly what lets you vault up the leaderboard. That's why Brooks Koepka took this place apart. He's an aggressive player, particularly when he's not at a major championship, and we saw him excel last year. Whether it was Koepka who won, Hideki, even Webb Simpson, for as accurate as he is off the tee, he's above average in terms of driving distance. It has been helpful for those top-end players. And again, while guys like Kuchar, Snedeker have been good here over the years, guys that have made the cut, finished in the top 20 almost every single year, we're looking for guys that are going to win this golf tournament, right? You can still play guys like Kuchar, Snedeker, that kind of thing. But if you're firing outrights, looking for winners, top 3 type of finishes, you want guys that also have this off the tee play. Another thing to note here is, of course, the accuracy. That's why it's shots gained off the tee, not just driving distance. Is with all these desert areas in play, with some of the water in play on the back 9, being an accurate driver of the golf ball, also important, right? Spraying the ball left and right is not going to be helpful unless you're Jordan Spieth, who tends to get away with it, can hit balls out of the desert, that type of thing. It is going to come up and bite you. So not just distance, you're also looking at some of the accuracy. Guys like a John Rahm, guys like a Brooks Koepka that combine that distance and accuracy, Justin Thomas as well, are going to be at a huge advantage this week. And now lastly, we have shots gained around the green, because no matter how good of an iron player you are here, with the runoff areas, with the undulation on these greens, you're going to have to get up and down. Even the best players in the world are missing 5 to 6 greens here per round, and they're tricky shots. Like I said, they're all raised surfaces. You're going to have a lot of shots where you short side yourself and the green is running away from you. It's designed devilish in that type of fashion. And much like a TPC Sawgrass, much like a PGA West Stadium course, The guys that can get up and down are going to get away with it, and the guys that don't have all the around the green shots in the bag, the guys that are losers for their career, you're going to see them bleed 2 to 3 strokes per round. So it tends to be important here. That's why we say that we have to have a complete player to go out there and win at TPC Scottsdale. It's why it's a borderline major ready type of venue. Would not be against it hosting a major championship, a Ryder Cup, President's Cup, anything like that. Just a great venue in terms of hosting for fans. Of course, it can hold 150,000 fans per day, but also in terms of the strategy setup, is great for it, right? You got to be good in all the categories. The only stat, and we'll talk about some bonus stats here. First off, shots gained putting, which is not going to be in my analysis. Guys like Hideki Matsuyama have won back-to-back. Kyle Stanley's won here. Brooks Koepka's won here twice. He's not a great putter. Clearly, shots gained putting on these Poa Nua Bermuda surfaces isn't so much important. Like I said before, it's really all about the green reading. If you can get the ball started online, it's going to go in the hole. You're not going to see it bobble left to right like we saw at Pebble or at Torrey Beach, where the Poa Nua can become really, really worrisome in the afternoon. So shots gained putting, pretty much non-existent in my modeling. I mean, it's going to be there like 5-6%, but it's typically closer to 15 to 20% in my modeling. So that's something to note. Birdie or better percentage is something that kind of makes up some of that gap. Because we're looking at guys that can take advantage of these risk-reward holes, I want guys that are aggressive by nature, that make the most birdies on tour. And even though if those are mixed in with a ton of bogeys, I'm going to be okay with it, right? Because we need guys that are willing to embrace that type of mindset. A good way to encapsulate that, birdie or better percentage. Guys that go out there and make the most birdies on tour are the ones that are putting themselves in the most birdie opportunities. Next up, we have par 4 scoring with the extra par 4 in play. Of course, this is a par 71. Par 4 scoring is going to be slightly more important, so you're seeing an extra 3 to 4% weighting in my pool as a result. And lastly, we have 3 putt avoidance. Also with the massive greens in play, nearly 7,000 square foot on average. Also tiered greens with quite a bit of undulation. Making sure you don't bleed away too many strokes with 3 putts is also going to be particularly helpful this week. And now for our comp courses. Courses I think you can use for some of your corollary analysis, for comparisons. You can take a look at some of the leaderboards, past results here, and you can see very much so this week some crossover. So first off, we have PGA West, the Stadium course, which was the home for 2 of the 4 rounds at the American Express. You have the desert type of feel there. You have the same type of green surfaces where it's the Bermuda mixed in with some Poa and bent grass. It's in Palm Springs, that dome type of conditions. We are not having very much of a wind effect at all. On top of the scenery and the difficulty, both golf courses played right around the same scoring average. Just a lot of similarities, especially with the hole setup. You have lots of greens that have fairway bunkering. You have lots of around the green bunkers. You have raised surfaces at PGA West. And if you really just transplanted me from PGA West to Scottsdale, I'd have a hard time differentiating between the two. I'd say the main difference would be the risk-reward aspect. Scottsdale, a little bit more ingenious with the design there, adding a lot of those forced carries, that type of thing, which bring a lot of big numbers into play. PGA West, a little bit more user-friendly, a little bit more straightforward, a little bit less thinking that goes into play, which for a Pete Dye design might be surprising. But Pete Dye designed that golf course a long time ago, well before we started playing over there at TPC Scottsdale, well before the redesign there in 2014. So I think a lot of that might have to do with it. There's a lot of water in play at the Stadium course as well, but not nearly as much as what we see at Sawgrass or something like that. It's on 7 holes at PGA West. We have water in play at 6 holes this week at Scottsdale. So a lot of similarities there. I would not be against using the shots gained metrics from the American Express, because the only golf course out of the 3 that they're using that week that they have shot length for is of course the Stadium course. So we can go ahead and use a lot of that data. Next up, we have TPC Summerlin, which is another desert-style TPC golf course. This, of course, in Las Vegas. You have a little bit more wind in play at Summerlin. The desert areas also tend to be a little bit more penal. There's quite a few more rocks over there in Las Vegas as compared to Scottsdale and Palm Springs. A lot more cactuses, that type of thing as well. But the setup, a lot of the bunkering, the contours of the greens, raised green surfaces, a lot of similarities there. So not quite the same correlation as what we've had at a PGA West, but also something where I'm looking for a lot of crossover. And lastly, we have TPC Sawgrass, the Stadium course. I'm willing to use it as a bit of a correlation here. Again, it's not in the desert, but in terms of setup, the things that we're looking for in terms of iron play, of course, getting up and down, some of those tricky chipping pitch shots around the green. It fits a lot of those type of things. The bunkering also very similar sand types out of both of these golf courses, and Scottsdale might be a little bit easier in terms of scoring, but it also still has that top end volatility where you guys can go out there and shoot a 75 or 76 extremely easy. Of course, the major difference is that there's a little bit more water in play at TPC Sawgrass. That's why we see the higher scoring averages there. But from a risk reward standpoint, from the undulation in the fairways and the greens, it checks all of the boxes. That is all I've got for this week's course breakdown. Hopefully you guys feel a little bit more prepared for this week than you did beforehand. Of course, we went over the key stats, our comp courses, the field, pretty much everything you need to know for this week. If there's anything you guys still don't know or would like a little bit more detail on, do not be shy at all to go ahead and let me know down in the comments. Also down in the comments, before you guys go ahead and get out of here, go ahead and let me know what you guys think the winning score is going to be. Personally, I've got 19 under par, the same thing that Brooks shot last year. This course definitely has its teeth. It's still scoreable though. So I see somebody getting to that same type of score, maybe a little bit higher than that, right? 17, 18 under par, but go ahead and let me know what you guys have got down there below. I appreciate you guys coming by and enjoying the content, all of your support here on the channel as well. If you guys haven't already liked the video or subscribed to the channel, make sure you guys go ahead and do so. We're gonna have even more golf content coming throughout the week, so you're not going to want to miss that at all, whether it's our DFS content, which will be coming out this afternoon, our showdown content throughout the weekend, our prize picks props for this weekend that'll be coming out for every single day. All of that will be dropping here, and by subscribing, you won't miss any of it. So again, make sure you guys go ahead and do so there. It also lets YouTube know that you like these videos. If you guys go ahead and like the video, so more people out there can go ahead and see it. Again, I appreciate you guys. I really look forward to this week. Till next time, good luck with all of your lineups, all of your bets for this week, and let's get this cash.